Few things represent the freedoms of leisure boating as well as dropping your anchor in a secluded spot on a sunny day. Yet, for far too many boaters, anchoring is considered a bit of a dark art. So in this video, we hope to explain how to be comfortable dropping your hook. First, let's look at the theory behind securing your boat to the seabed. Any object that floats is subject to the forces of wind or current. If there's no wind and no current at all, a floating object will remain stationary. But there's almost always some wind or some current. And so to ensure boats don't just start drifting around crashing into rocks or each other, you need to deploy some sort of ground tackle to secure you to the sea, river or lake bed. On shallow rivers, canals and lakes, small boats often use nothing more sophisticated than a weight on a length of rope. But on the open ocean, where fierce tides, currents and winds are encountered, you need to use much more substantial tackle. The simple theory being the more weight in your ground tackle, the safer you'll be, whatever the weather. So we know we need the weight, and the best place to have that weight is normally over the pointy bit at the front of the boat. The theory here being that if the current and or wind are acting on your boat, better to present the slenderest part to reduce the influence of the force as much as you can. So whilst it's perfectly possible to use a solid weight as an anchor, it's not very practical, so more efficient designs have evolved. For leisure boats, we're presented with a huge choice of designs, which are shaped to be effective at holding themselves to the seabed whilst remaining light enough to be manageable, and they're constructed to be easy to deploy from a small boat. Traditional designs have been rebranded and tend to be cheaper, but there's a growing choice of new designs which boast spectacular holding power across a wide range of seabed types. Choice depends on the type of anchoring you're going to be doing. For summertime stops from your local mooring, a cheaper anchor will do the job adequately, but for those considering a liveaboard lifestyle, it's essential to have the best you can get to protect your home and your life. Now, we said the more weight we put down, the safer we are, so surely reducing weight in these modern designs is somewhat counterproductive. But all modern anchors are attached to a length of chain, and it's the chain that adds the weight you need. The more chain you have at your disposal, the more weight you can put on the seabed. So whilst small day boats might attach a length of chain to the boat using rope, most boats use chain for the entire length from the bow of the boat all the way to the anchor stock. It's also worth noting that with modern anchors, a key design parameter is to dig into the seabed and prevent drag. The action of the chain, therefore, not only adds weight, but also keeps the anchor lying undisturbed and at the best angle for it to remain dug in. When weighing anchor, lifting the chain changes the angle and allows it to pull smoothly away from the seabed. So that's enough theory for now. Let's get on board and approach our chosen anchorage.
So the first job when you're coming into anchor is you've got to work out how much depth you've got between now and when the water is at its lowest. We are at 3 o'clock and low water is 5 o'clock. So we've got 2 hours before low water. So we can do a little calculation to work out how much depth it'll drop between now and the bottom of the tide. And we know then that we've got to have at least that under the keel plus a bit more for safety.
So let's look at the tide tables. It's 1500 now, and we have 1605 as the next low water. But this almanac is in universal time, so we need to add the hour on for British summertime. Then we'll take a look at the heights above the charted depth. The last high water was 4.6 metres, and the next low water will be 1.1 metres, meaning the tide will have dropped a total of 3.5 metres. The quick rule of twelfths method tells us that in the last 2 hours the tide will drop 3/12, and 3/12 of 3.5 is 0.875. If we then add the draft of the boat, 1.6, to the 0.875 and to the 1.1, we get 3.575. So rounding up for safety, if we want to avoid touching the bottom in 2 hours' time, our depth sounder must read more than 4 metres when we drop the anchor.
Second decision is working out where everybody else is and where you've got enough clear space to drop your hook and swing. Now, we're 2 hours away from low water, so in 2 hours, all those boats are going to change direction and they're going to hang a different way. So we've got to work that out. We're not just going and dropping anchor and everybody's going to be going the same way. When the tide turns, all the boats turn to. So we've got to make sure that we not only just got enough room for our anchorage when we drop, but also when we turn around, are we going to be turning into someone else? Are we going to go over the top of anybody else's chain?
Here is a single vessel at anchor. The tide is flooding in and the boat lies with its bows into the stream. As the tide slackens, it starts to swing into the wind. But as the ebb picks up speed, it'll once again lie bows to the tide. Now let's look at 3 boats at anchor. We might assume they'll all turn at the same time, but long-keeled yachts with all-chain anchor roads will normally lie to the tide unless the wind is really blowing, whilst in contrast, a planing powerboat with a large superstructure and a rope and chain setup will be much more influenced by the wind. In practice, this means that boats can start their turns at different times depending on their hull type and choice of tackle. Of course, in this setup, all the boats have chosen to use the same length of anchor road, but if someone lets out a much longer scope, their turning circles will be completely different, and in busy anchorages it's very easy to have a coming together at the turning of the tide.
It's difficult to guess that because you don't know how much they've put out and you don't know where they've put them. They may have come at a different time and the angle was different then. So you kind of got to make a guess, best guess.
It should go without saying that you need to check your chart and aim for a spot that suits your boat and the tidal height you'll encounter. Here at East Head, there are areas that dry to the south of the anchorage, whilst to the north we must be mindful not to anchor in the main channel.
So we've got to make a call about how the tide's running. As you can see around the East Head buoy there, the East Head Spit buoy, that is running quick. So you've also got to check your depth. It's very important to know how much you're going to drop. Now we've got 7 metres at the moment, so that means we'd have to drop quite a bit of chain at this point.
Exactly how much chain is determined by the scope of your anchor road. Scope is the ratio of how much anchor road you put out to the depth of water. So if you're in 5 metres of water and you want a scope of 5:1, you need to drop 25 metres of road. Deciding how much scope you should put out to any given situation is a subject for great debate. As we've already established, the more you put out, the safer you are. So it might follow that dropping your entire ground tackle every time would seem like a bit of a no-brainer. But that would give you a very large swinging circle and might cause you to swing into shallower water or into other obstructions or other vessels. And remember, those other vessels might arrive after you've already settled yourself down. So, what is the right amount? As we explained earlier, a yacht with low freeboard and an all-chain road reacts very differently to a powerboat with ground tackle made up of both rope and chain. If you're staying overnight, you need the confidence that you won't drag. And certainly if the forecast predicts any kind of blow, you need to factor that into your scope. But if it's a quick lunchtime stop on a calm day, you'll be able to get away with dropping much less without fear of dragging. As this really depends so much on local conditions, the type of boat you're in and the ground tackle you have, that I'm going to stick to this generalised recommendation from the Royal Yachting Association. For now though, let's put the theory aside and get to the important bit of dropping the anchor.
Probably more important to look behind you into the space that you're going to fill when you drop your hook. You're going to go back that way. So make sure that when you're dropping it, you're not dropping it with a boat right behind you because you'll be on him in no time. So I'm taking a look now at all the various possibilities and I think we've got 6 metres of water now, which is actually a bit more reasonable.
Once you've found your spot, stop the boat and let her settle. As the tide starts to move her backwards, you can drop the chain. This will lay it over the seabed rather than dumping a massive pile of chain on top of your anchor.
Really important to take a transit to make sure that you're not moving when you think you're set. Going to give us a little kick astern now. Hopefully that'll set the anchor properly. But look at the speed it looks like we're going at the moment. So it's an hour before low water now. We've been here about an hour. So we should start to see the stream flattening off a little bit. And it's interesting that the way that the tide works around here is it isn't slackening off at the moment. It's still very, very strong. So we'll monitor the situation and keep you informed. See some of the boats over there have started to turn a little bit into the wind because
The stream out here is still quite strong. The stream in there is starting to slacken off.
So it's 10 minutes after low water now, and as you can see, we're now lying to the wind, not to the tide. There's a boat over there that made a little miscalculation and he's on the bottom.
Once it's time to leave, you have to weigh anchor. As the chain pulls the boat forward, it can slew round and start to lead off to one side. Like so many small leisure boats, Confidence has a bow roller, and care must be taken to keep the rode straight ahead as you bring it in. If it's not pulling straight, you risk the rope or chain jumping off the rollers and jamming on the inside of the bracket. Chain markers are just as important when weighing anchor. You need to know when the chain is the same depth as the water, as that's when you'll feel the anchor pull out of the seabed. The chain will tension just before the anchor breaks out. The stickier the mud and the deeper your anchor is dug in, and the greater that tension will be. Just wait patiently, and once the tension gives, you can haul in again. Notice how the chain is now hanging straight down. That's because we're no longer attached, and the boat is floating free. So now you have to haul in quickly and be very aware of your surroundings. You'll start to drift backwards, and you need to be aware you're not going to hit anything. Using a swivel between the chain and the anchor helps when you bring the anchor over the roller. The downside is the long-term effects of having dissimilar metals and water. You can see here the first link in the chain is badly corroded. So that's it. Just a quick tidy up and we're away. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, it really does help the channel. And thanks for watching.